Reading books is a wonderful hobby. They become a comfort and at a certain moment a part of your daily life. You will feel like you cannot go one day without reading a book, and isn't that great? The smell of the paper, the feeling of holding a book in your hands, and the sound of the paper, of the turning pages. It is a wonderful thing, so let's talk about books. If you want to become good at something, you have to do it every day. And this rule applies to everything in life. If you want to be good at something, you have to be willing to spend time on it. One thing you can do is to carry a book with you everywhere you go. Read whenever you can, even if it's just one page. And it really helps to have books lying around in your house. I have several stacks everywhere. I like to just grab one of those books, and usually I have read them before and I can easily go to one of the passages that I marked, for example, a quote that I loved, and I like to just reread the quote and then reflect on it. This is a great way to always be engaging with the material that you've read or that you're about to read. You have to build yourself a ritual. For example, every day before I go to bed, I will read 2 pages, for example. And then at a certain moment, you will get used to this ritual and you will never go without it anymore. You have to build yourself reading habits, reading rituals. So you can, for example, give yourself the goal of reading 2 pages before bed and do this every day. You can also create a reading nook, make things cozy, make things inviting. When you do sit down to read, give the book your full attention. If the author makes references to certain books, certain poems, certain artworks, look them up. Take advantage of the fact that we have the internet. Look things up, educate yourself. For example, I am currently reading Villette by Charlotte Bronte, and my orange tabs are the tabs that are references to works and quotes and other books and so on. And to give you an example, I marked a scene where the main character is in an art gallery and they are all looking at the Venus of the Nile. And so I looked it up. It's a beautiful statue. She also makes a reference to a poem, and in the novel they are reflecting on this poem. I looked it up, I read the poem, and so I think this is a great way to be more engaged in what you're reading and also get to know other works, which leads me to keeping a reading list. I think this is very important because it is so encouraging, like to have this huge list of books that you still want to get to, and it motivates you to go ahead and read because you want to get to all of these books on your list and life is short. I have a separate list for books that people recommended me. For example, if someone would recommend me Villette by Charlotte Bronte, I would look up that book, read the little summary on the back, and if it sparks an interest, I will put it on my list of books that people recommended me. I also make lists of the books that my favorite authors loved, or authors that my favorite authors loved. This is a great way to get introduced to new authors that you wouldn't get introduced to otherwise. I also have a list of all of the books of my favorite authors, for example, Victor Hugo, Oscar Wilde, Honoré de Balzac, and I just try to prioritize them. I also want to recommend using a reading journal. I feel like once I start writing about the books that I read, about the storyline, about the characters, that I truly start to reflect and think about what I'm reading, and this really makes you read on a deeper level. So I recommend getting yourself a nice journal. It doesn't need to be expensive. You can get it for a couple of dollars. Write down the title and the author on top of the page, and then from time to time you write down your thoughts. Of course, you can also write in your books, but I know this isn't for everyone. It is called marginalia. For example, I have here my edition of Les Miserables. I always use tabs because I want to keep track of things while I read, but I do not always write in my books. I only write in them when they are old and were cheap, and when I have strong feelings about the book. And then I just write things down, I mark things, and it really has become this really personal thing. I love it, but I usually just use my journal. Of course, you can also use post-its and stick them inside the book. This is how you discover your deepest thoughts about what you're reading. I also have a separate section in my journal for quotes that I loved, and I reread them from time to time. I sometimes just grab my journal and start reading the quotes that I loved from certain books and reflect on them. You can also approach quotes in a different way. For example, Oscar Wilde and I think Leo Tolstoy, they loved keeping quotes in their journal, and they put them in their own words and then wrote about them. They reflected on them, and I think this is such a great thing. If you're enjoying my content, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Thank you so much. I also think, especially when you're starting out reading, that you should give every genre a chance. Dare to go out of your comfort zone once in a while. And I think when you mark references in books to other works, for example, imagine there's a reference to Othello by Shakespeare in one of the books that you're currently reading. You go ahead and look up Othello, and imagine that it doesn't really speak to you. Like, Shakespeare is too hard to read, it is in Old English, and the storyline doesn't really spark an interest. Maybe it's a good thing to try it anyway and challenge yourself, and who knows, maybe you end up liking it. Also, try to educate yourself by listening to or following fellow book nerds. They will introduce you to new works of literature, and your reading list will keep growing. If you're interested in how I annotate my books, how I tab my books, my whole process, I do have a video about it, an in-depth guide. So if you're interested, go check that video out by the end of this video. I also want to mention to be aware of your posture while you are reading, and also your eye health. Make sure that you have good light. Don't put a book too close to your face because your eyes will get tired much easier. Put it at a little distance. Sometimes look away into the distance to a point to help your eyes relax. Make sure to have enough light to prevent fatigue, dry eyes, and headaches. If you're reading for longer periods at a time, take a little break. We want to have a good posture, avoid back pain, but also sit in a comfortable way. So if you're interested in knowing how to sit while reading, because it's very important, go check out that video. I also find it important that you try out every medium. So audiobooks, ebooks, physical books. There is so much choice. I used to be a physical book girl only because I love the feel of holding a book in my hands, the smell, the turning of the pages, the sound that the pages make. It is all so wonderful. But I learned to appreciate other mediums as well, audiobooks, ebooks. Now, I appreciate audiobooks especially because I suffer from migraines, and whenever I have to lie down in the dark in my bed, there is nothing I can do. And audiobooks are such a savior because I at least can listen to great literature while I am resting, and I am so grateful for this. So maybe just like me, you learn to give audiobooks a chance. So you just need to try it. Maybe, for example, you love listening to an audiobook before going to bed, like for example one chapter, listening to it while you're falling asleep. It is very soothing, actually. You should definitely try it. Ebooks are super handy when you're like going to some event. For example, when I go to a signing session as an author and I have some time to kill and I cannot take my book of 600 pages with me because it's too much, then I just grab my e-reader, put it in my purse because it's so easy to store, and then when I have some dead moments, I can just open up the ebook and get some reading done instead of mindlessly scrolling through my phone, which I hate. I hate wasting my time when I can read. Okay, so next is to improve your vocabulary. When you find words that you don't understand, mark them to look them up later or look them up immediately. And that's why it's handy to keep some tabs with you, because when you are just into the story, when you're sucked into a story and you don't want to interrupt it by looking things up, you can just mark the page and then look them up later, and this will help you learn new words, which is amazing. And of course, it also applies to buildings. Look up buildings that are described, look up the history of historical people that are described. You know, you have the internet, and make use of it. Use it to your advantage, because we are so lucky to be able to look things up all the time, anywhere. Like, it is such a privilege, and I think we oftentimes forget how amazing it is. We have all the information available anytime. Now, should you read book reviews? I think this is a great way to get some new insights about the book that you've read. Do not look up reviews before you have read the book or during you are reading the book. I feel like this really spoils the experience. But more importantly, it prevents you from forming your own opinion. It is so important to first sit down with your own thoughts without them being influenced by other people's opinion. We get information and thoughts of other people all the time, and I sometimes wonder how much of my opinion is my own, if you know what I mean. So we have the option of not looking at reviews before we start reading a book, which is actually a great thing nowadays, to like go into something without having an opinion about it. So I recommend keeping reading the book reviews till the end. Also, discussing a book with other people, amazing. Like, it gives you new ideas, it gives you new perspectives. It is awesome. That's why it's also a really good thing to join a book community or a reading club, because you have the chance to talk to other people about what you're reading and like pretend that the main characters are real people and talk about them like they're real people. Now imagine that my book of Les Misérables is lying around in the kitchen. I can just go to a passage in the book because I have yellow tabs for quotes, for example, and then I can just go ahead, read that quote, and reflect on it. So I open up the book and it says, "What is the turmoil in a city compared with that of the human heart?" I marked that quote. Do I still remember why I marked it? Why was it in the story? Do I remember what it was about? How do I feel about that quote right now, and which ideas does it spark? I immediately have to think about all the fighting and the killing that is going on in this world, which is awful. And so that is what is coming into my mind. Man, the individual, is a deeper being than man in the mass. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.